Welcome to Below the Line, where we talk about working in Hollywood from the crew perspective. My name is Skid. I'm a former assistant director and your host.
Quiet on the set.
Today we're talking about St. Denis Medical, the workplace comedy series that's currently airing on NBC and streaming on Peacock. And my guests today are three camera operators from the show. First, Jacob Pinger, you were the A operator all season. Welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for having some below the line people, talk about this side of things. We don't get to talk about this very often.
Next, Mande Whitaker, you were the B operator for 13 episodes. Glad you could join us.
Thank you for having us.
And finally, Danny Whiteneck, you were the B operator for 5 episodes. Great seeing you as well.
Yeah, so glad to be here. Thank you.
Now, a warning for listeners, today's conversation will contain spoilers, but only for the 6 episodes that aired in November and December of 2024. The show has been on holiday hiatus for the last month, but we'll start airing new episodes this coming week. So to get us started, talk to me about when you did production on this and sort of what the lead up was for the premiere last November.
I didn't work on the pilot. Mande worked on the pilot with Matt Valentine, who's an old friend of ours. And so I started, I guess, technically on episode 2. And so I didn't have any idea what the show really was doing, other than just some brief conversations with my boss, Jay Hunter, who's the director of photography. And Mande was really critical to me in terms of just getting me up to speed on what they were doing and all the stuff that they had tried during the pilot. I was also given access to basically all the raw footage they had shot from the pilot, which was really, really helpful, but also pretty intimidating because, and Mande can kind of address this from a first person standpoint, but it seemed to me that they were sort of trying everything, and they must have been shooting like really long days because they would sort of shoot things like scenes multiple times in multiple ways because they were really trying to figure out what the show was. So when I started, there was kind of a better idea of what it was going to be, but it was still sort of in the process of kind of like figuring it out and trying to get to a much more efficient place with how it was shot so that, the days could be much shorter and could fit into a 5-day schedule as opposed to like, what did you guys do, Mande, on the pilot? Like 7 or 8?
I think so.
Yeah.
It was so long ago.
You had a couple of extra days on the pilot.
Yeah, because the pilot was before the strike. And so we shot the pilot and then we were in limbo land, like, please, 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 can we have a TV show? I think that's something you said, though, Jacob, about how it was, we were like finding our footing and our rhythm and how it was going to go during the pilot. It kind of reminds me, though, of like in the unscripted world, that's kind of what you're doing too. Like you're not shooting things different ways, but you're shooting a lot more while you're trying to figure out the story, figure out how the show is going to work, what the characters are like, how they work together. So yeah, the pilot was a big learning process for everybody, which was really cool, to be a part of.
Let's take a step back for listeners who maybe are not familiar with the show. So the approach on this is a faux documentary style, like The Office is probably a show people are familiar with. So you're talking about in that pilot, figuring out how that's going to work for this show and kind of, Mande, I like what you said about comparing it to unscripted.
Yeah, I mean, I think, in the unscripted world, you're learning the characters, so you're learning how, kind of like watching wildlife, you're like learning how they act and react to things so that you can better predict their behavior and, oh, I need to go to this person at this moment because they're definitely going to have a reaction or whatever, right? So the cast on a scripted show is building their character relationships, and it kind of evolves in a similar way. Like you're watching the characters build their character relationships. And so the difference in these shows is like one of the things we were learning is what reads as documentary and what doesn't. Because on an unscripted show, I would want to make sure that I was looking out my left eye and catching that person's reaction, or line or whatever as it's happening. Whereas on a mockumentary show, you want to wait and catch it once they've already started talking. So like hearing them brings you to them to get their line. which reads as documentary, right? It's a really weird sort of mind fuck that you have to learn as somebody who comes from unscripted, where you're expected to catch everything and be like really on your toes, to slowing down a little and reacting rather than anticipating, if that makes sense. But a lot of the process was the same, like watching the characters get to know each other and the actors get to know each other. So then you can kind of feel when they're going to improv something, or when they're going to shoot a look to camera, and they're watching us too. So then, they're learning, oh, Mande might pan to me after somebody says this thing because I should have a reaction. And then they know to look at me, and look at the camera.
And as I understand it, all of you actually had a lot of experience with unscripted work before you worked on this show. Is that correct? Give me some more sense of the background and what you brought to this show.
Yeah, so I came on episode 14 through 18. So I feel like by the time I got there, the style, I mean, Pinger, correct me if I'm wrong, but the style was kind of already in place by that point. So, I mean, I kind of came in, and for me, being a reality camera operator, all my experience, except for a little over 2 seasons of scripted, is all a reality background or unscripted. So to go onto a show like this where there's added camera movement, is a bit tricky to like how much camera movement should I add? Well, how much is too much? We never got to know it was too much. So it goes against our instinct because when you're shooting reality, a lot of times added camera movement might look like a mistake, or maybe we're at the end of our lens where any added movement might look too shaky. They want to be able to use any shot because they don't know what's going to happen. And stepping onto this set and just kind of just feeling that out the first episode of how much movement I was, you know, it took some getting used to for sure.
I feel like Jacob and I, we kept getting the notes of like messier or less perfect, which is, it feels good, I guess, but you're like, are you sure? Do you really want me to do that? But then when you watch it, you're like, oh, okay, it's weird. It's a very weird, like if somebody watches a reality show versus, and not like a, oh, this is so awful, but not like a lowbrow reality show, but like a, some production value reality show. You'll notice the difference between these mockumentaries whipping all around and constantly adjusting their focal length. That does not happen in reality. And I don't know why it works, but it does. Because I was like so worried they were going to be like, you guys are terrible camera operators, but I mean, it reads. And when I watched it, I was like, okay, it reads. I agree. But it is a weird kind of mental shift because all the muscle memory is there, right? Like we can land a crazy zoom, and we have these amazing focus pullers who, in my opinion, are like magicians because I don't know how they do it. But like, yeah, the shift between reality, I think, it's like, okay, what skills do I use? And then what skills am I learning?
There's something that the audience wants to be reminded that there's a camera
Mhm.
as another person there versus in reality, even though it's happening in reality, the audience kind of wants to forget.
Yes, exactly.
Oh, that's exactly right. Yeah. So in reality, we are flies on the wall. We don't exist because a lot of these cast members have never been on camera before. And for them to come out of their shell and for the real drama to happen, they almost need to forget we're there.
You just made it all make sense. Like that one sentence. I'm like, oh, I get it now.
Yeah, I mean, we're not supposed to talk to the cast members, which is totally different in the scripted world. But in reality, a lot of times we're not supposed to talk to them. We're supposed to refer them to the producers. Yeah, we're flies on the wall. So it's like we're backing up and using our lenses. And that's another reason why we're trying to keep that shot as steady as possible. I mean, that's kind of like a badge of honor in reality is to be a steady operator. So you don't want to have these shaky shots. It's totally different when you step on a scripted set where you are more engaged with the actors and you do have to speak with them from time to time. And we try not to, I think on this show, to ask them to, maybe step over or, put your weight on your left foot so I can shoot around you. I think we usually get a couple takes in, and that's kind of a last resort to have to ask them to move because we want to fight for those shots to make it look more like a, faux documentary.
You guys are making me think like of we probably all have some fairly similar backgrounds in terms of our evolution is personal evolution through the kind of shooting we do. On my very, very first reality show, it was basically a single camera following a rock band around for VH1. And in that environment, it was completely not set up. You had no idea what they were going to do, what they were going to say, and it was a rock band, and they were drunk most of the time. So it was almost like nature photography, but it was such a good training ground. That was, for me, it was 24 years ago. And like since then, basically my entire life has been spent trying to figure out ways to make my camera work smoother and more stable, even in a documentary environment. And I think all of us have seen this evolution where the first reality shows, when you think of like the real world, where it was truly, it wasn't really set up, certainly not in the way that reality shows became set up, where they were literally scripted. And the evolution of the way that those shows looked, they wanted to move away from feeling like a shaky single camera documentary environment. And they wanted the reality shows to look like scripted shows, to the point where like some of these, housewives of this and that kind of shows, like they look gorgeous and they're lit, and there's cameras that are just like perfectly positioned, and they just somehow always seem to be in the right place to get something, like somebody flipping a table over or something. St. Denis Medical, basically at the end of this 25-year evolution, is saying, well, let's make these shows look like the real world again. Like we have to make it look like we didn't know what was going to happen, and we have to make it look like the camera person just happened to barely catch something, as opposed to be perfectly there waiting for it. And that includes gags, like sight gags. There's like a shot that I saw the other day where the camera pans over and just barely catches Kaliko's character dragging a cross, and she knocks something over off of like a little nursing stand. And we did that probably 7 or 8 times to get the timing that they liked, so that it would make it seem like, oh, you just barely got it and you didn't know it was going to happen. So it could be a gag, but it can also be a line, just, or a reaction where they want to pan over and get, Meki's character saying a funny reaction, but they want to make it seem like you didn't know it was going to happen. So we spent, at least me personally, I think we all did, we spent a couple decades trying to figure out how to always be in the right place to make sure you get something and be perfectly smooth and steady. And then the challenge is that now we have producers and directors who are saying, oh, it's too steady, it's too smooth, it looks like you anticipated it too much. So we have to like kind of go back in time to a point when we were like brand new and not very good at our jobs in some ways. And so they're like, make it shakier. We're like, are you sure?
Yeah.
But like Mandy said, then you see it all cut together, and there's to me, there's an energy to it, that I think they committed to this kind of frenetic energy to the way it's shot and the editing to some extent. And there's a line that you don't want to cross where it becomes too crazy. I think, like Mandy said, like sometimes we were looking at each other like, this feels pretty crazy. But then, they can always kind of dial it back, or, or ratchet it up to 11 in post if they want. But I feel like they've done a pretty good job of maintaining, they've done a really good job, the episodes I've seen, of maintaining the energy level that this kind of shooting gives you without taking it too far where you can like have trouble following the story. But then if the energy dips, like I think the challenge is that if they maintain a certain energy that you get from the way we shoot it, and then if it ever dips and it becomes very static, like then it kind of like you notice it and the whole thing could potentially grind to a halt. So I feel like it is a challenge for them to like once they set that bar of energy, they can never kind of devolve back into like something easy where it's just two cross shooting cameras that are just sitting there. That would just feel like, ooh, it's boring.
Well, speaking
So
of the
there's,
two,
oh, go ahead.
if you had something else to say, always go ahead. But if you're like, oh man, I'm talking so much, thank goodness Skid interrupted here, then I'm happy to do that as well. So that's,
yeah, I think it was that.
We'll find our own rhythm, just like an A and B camera. We'll find our own rhythm. So take me on to the set and explain to me from a technical perspective. You've got the A camera, you've got the B camera. What coordination are you guys doing with each other? And incidentally, you've also got a boom mic and probably some other crew around. Give me a sense of what we don't see, but the work you guys have to do to keep it invisible.
Well, we usually start off with the two camera coverage. I don't know. I guess each scene we approached with, are we going to do the single cam version first or second? Sometimes I feel like it was kind of depending on, like, if the two camera coverage was going to be built off the single camera coverage, we do the single camera first and then fall into the spots that made sense. Otherwise, we would do the two camera coverage and clean it up with a single camera version that would kind of bind it all and keep the energy that Jacob was just talking about.
Okay, so there'll be a take where one camera operator is just at craft service.
Yeah, that's me.
And the A camera will be running through without worrying about where the other camera might be.
Yes, total freedom.
But then several other takes, you guys are covering different parts that might cut in or out of that first take, or vice versa. You're saying if the coverage is more important, is kind of the essence of the scene, maybe you start with that.
Correct. That's my feeling about it. And I think it was really helpful. I thought it was a really great idea. I don't know whose idea it was to have this single camera pass and then also the two camera pass, but it was genius. I thought it worked really well as a process. And I think it reads well in the show when I watch, like how it starts single camera with Jacob. And then maybe it'll end up being two camera coverage, for part of the scene. And I don't know, it all makes so much sense. And I'm sure there's some scenes, Jacob, that are all single camera. It's hard for me to remember.
Yeah,
because it was so fast paced. It's like, oh.
The one thing that I felt like I noticed was when we were watching, when I was watching the episodes that have aired, which are actually airing kind of out of order of how they were shot. But I think maybe the first 3 episodes are airing in the order they were shot. But as it kind of as I got through watching the 6 episodes that have aired, I felt like I could kind of sense the strategy kind of coming in more into play where, like Mandy's saying, they were able to start using more single camera kind of active shooting and a little bit less of the cross coverage two camera stuff. Because I think we were sort of figuring out how it could work and what the timing of stuff would be. And it just sort of started working a little bit better as the episodes kind of, as we kept shooting, the sort of concept kind of got to sink in a little more.
Mm-hmm.
We would, in essence, shoot every scene 2 ways. It sometimes varied on which we would do first, but one way of shooting it is that there's 2 cameras, there's an A and a B, they're equal relevance, equal importance, and they're cross-covering the scene, which means one camera is shooting one side of the scene at the same time that the second camera is shooting the other side of the scene, where basically the actors are facing each other. We have shots of both of them looking at each other at the same time. And then they can overlap dialogue and they can overlap action, and it's all covered. A lot of shows, handheld shows, that's it. That would be it. Like, I guess that's the main difference. Like a lot of shows I've worked on, like The Office or Parks and Rec and Brooklyn Nine-Nine and stuff, that would be it. That's how you would shoot the scene. You'd cross cover it and you'd move on. And maybe you'd shoot a wide shot and you'd move on. But this added aspect of what we're doing is that once we do that cross coverage, then one camera will come in, and it was basically the A camera that would come in and shoot the scene as if basically that was the only camera, which means panning from person to person as they're speaking, panning to catch something that's on the other side of the room, and maybe even zooming in like 30 feet to catch something or a detail, and trying to shoot it in the way, like we were saying, like we used to shoot a reality show 20 years ago when you were just one camera trying to shoot 5 people all by yourself.
One little note that I don't know if audience members will appreciate, but in the original reality TV world, like I worked on Real World in the 90s, and there were 5 operators for the whole 24-hour shift. So you were by yourself covering most of the time. If they walk out of the house, you walk out of the house. Now on reality shows that I work on, there's like 5 to 20 operators. It's multicam. So you're set up to catch in specific places to catch everything. So that's something people can also watch, because not that reality shows are necessarily fake now, it's that there's more cameras and you're all strategically placed to catch things, whereas these mockumentary shows are going back to the original, like Jacob said, of just one or two maybe, cameras happening to catch things, which means you miss more theoretically to make it seem real. I love the single camera pass. I thought that it just helped so much.
Yeah, I just wanted to point out too, like in reality, a lot of these shows as operators, we get into a situation where we're covering a scene with a single camera, and there might be multiple cast members in the scene, and you're trying to look at it from an editing perspective that they're going to need cutaways, reaction shots, wide shots to show geography. So you're trying to throw all that into a single camera reality scene that you're only going to see one time. So you have to pick and choose your moments where maybe the story dies down a little, and then you're like, okay, now it's time to go in and get a reaction shot. Or if they're talking about something, a cutaway might be more important than a talking shot. So you go for the cutaway. And those are all things that you learn over years of shooting reality. And I only had to do a couple of the single camera passes on St. Denis, but it's shot a little differently because since you have that cross coverage, which when I was on episode 14 through 18, for the most part, we would do the cross coverage first. And then, I mean, not every scene, but most of them. And then a camera would go in and do the single camera pass. But I think it seemed like the goal there would be more to follow all the action. Obviously, you don't need to go in for, wide shots because we get those at the end and, maybe cutaways and stuff like that. But you're kind of trying to follow and tell the entire story of the scene with one fluid shot, which is definitely a lot different than how you would do it in a reality scene. So it's challenging in its own ways. Like I said, I only had to do three, and they weren't like very hard ones, but it's definitely a lot harder than it looks. I think Jacob can
Oh,
attest to
thanks.
that.
Yeah. It might be worth mentioning too. We had Jay Hunter, the DP, had I thought it worked really well, a really great way of doing the wide shots where we got really far away on a super long lens on a dolly, but still made it look handheld and did more of like a compressed wide shot. So it seemed like an operator was hiding really far away, getting this sort of spy-like wide shot for the scenes that we would do at the end, of a lot of scenes. And I thought it was great. It read really well in the episodes, and it was something we could do quickly, like, okay, real quick, let's set up, the ISCO and the dolly for a wide shot and knock that out. And I think it helped a lot, and still looked documentary like, which is what I find some of the mockumentary shows, the getting the wide and establishing, the location and stuff. That's the tricky part because you don't want it to be terribly ugly. And I thought this was a really great solution that Jay had.
Jay Hunter, the director of photography, I think I give him tremendous amount of credit for creating the look of the show because I've been on a number of shows in the last years that presented this idea that they were a mockumentary. And then when push came to shove, it almost always was abandoned, because when you sort of started actually shooting a scripted show as if it was a documentary, people generally on set would kind of freak out because they would be afraid that it would be too hard to edit. TV directors have kind of been they've been sort of trained, I feel, to make sure they're presenting, especially in comedy, like they have to present coverage. Every line, every moment has to be in a medium and a close up and a wide. And when you shoot in a way that's a documentary, what happens is some directors completely get lost in terms of keeping track of, are they delivering the coverage that needs to happen? And so at some point, there has to be a kind of courage in a way to say, this is how we're shooting this show. And we're going to make this work and commit to something that really is, it sounds really simple when we say it, or shooting it like a documentary. But at a certain point, like I said, I've seen a lot of shows and just give up on the idea and revert into this very safe two camera coverage kind of way of shooting. But this show just stuck to its guns in a way that I think is in my experience pretty unique. And, Jay Hunter deserves a lot of credit for that. And then the other part, like Mandy was saying, like there's still a lot of sort of aesthetic planning that went into it. And there's a lot of moment to moment, day by day aesthetic decision making that's happening. So if we do, multiple takes, we will get notes about framing, about camera movement, about timing, about lens size, about when to do a rack focus. So it comes off as very organic. And I think there is, there's at a certain point, you have to give the operators that kind of freedom to perform in the moment. But the list of notes that we do get between takes is pretty extensive at times. And so a lot of that comes down to Jay Hunter's eyeballs being on the monitor and making sure that we're staying consistent with the vision of the show and that we're actually getting the jokes on camera, we're getting the story points on camera, and that aesthetically he's happy with what we're doing. Like one of the questions I get a lot of times is like, when you're operating, do you just decide when to pan and zoom around? And the answer is, sort of, because like sometimes the notes will be so specific. Like we'll literally get a note like where the director or someone will come up and be like, okay, so on that last take, David Allen Greer like arched his eyebrow and you panned over just a half a second too soon. So on the next take, right, and this might be a 5-minute take, and your note is at minute 2 minutes and 13 seconds, David Allen Greer is going to arch his eyebrows, and we want you to pan over a half second later. That's the note for your take, and you have to incorporate that and do all the other stuff that you've been doing, and then it matters. I mean, it matters to a writer, it matters to a producer, it matters to a director, it matters to a cinematographer. So, like, this is also a big part of the job that is, I think, an added. Just it's part of the job. That's all it is. And in reality shows, I never had that kind of sort of direction in a reality show.
I find it really reassuring because I'm the kind of person that like I'm trying to be a good soldier and I want to know what you want. Sometimes I feel like we were getting notes because they wanted to play with something and see how it would look if we did it this way or that way. How does it read? Is it better or worse? And sometimes, it was like, we're thinking of 1,000 things and we're walking around and trying not to hit things or see things we're not supposed to see or each other and reflections and booms. And that can affect your timing as well. So for me, I really find comfort in the scripted world and the notes that I get because I feel like I know what they want from me. And that if I'm not getting what they want, they're going to tell me. I really like that in the scripted world. I mean, I feel pretty confident in the unscripted world, but it's also kind of, it's just happening. And then you're like, did I do a good job? Did I get everything? Whatever. Whereas in this world, I feel like I get more than one try and I know what they want. And each director is different. Every week is a different director. So like they all communicate differently. They all want us to shoot kind of differently. That's where Jay comes in and sort of like filters all the information and talks to them ahead of time about, the look of the show and why we shoot things, the way we do. Because it moves so fast. A lot of directors would be like, oh my God, this is so fast. Quite a few of them work in this mockumentary world, so they're used to it, and then others don't. And so I think for people that have longer to shoot an episode, it can be a little fast paced at first. But once they see like, oh, well, Jacob and I and Danny are gonna like watch the scene while the cast is rehearsing it once, and then we're gonna talk to each other and talk to Jay, and then we're gonna shoot it. And it's very quick. And I remember there were a couple directors that would be like, Jay'd be like, okay, we're ready. Let's light and then let's shoot. And the director would be like, what? Are you serious? And we're like, yeah, we got it. It made me feel good whenever that happened because like we would do it, we wouldn't see each other, we wouldn't run into each other, and they'd be like, that was so crazy. And then I felt like, okay, the 25 years in reality is paying off now. And that feels good because people treat us so shitty sometimes in reality that anytime I feel like, look at our skill set, it just makes me feel good.
Yeah, I think part of shooting reality, the more you do it, you kind of realize that it's almost important to know what other operators are shooting versus what you're shooting so that you are complementing what they're shooting. If they go wide, you might want to go on a tighter shot. Or they're not on your blind side and you can see them. I mean, I can pretty much tell what shot they're on by looking at them. If their lens is tilted down, they're probably on a wide shot. If they're more focused in this level, they're probably on a tighter shot or a single. So you can kind of base what you should be shooting off of that. Not at all times. It might make sense for you to both be tight or both be wide, but it does help to know what the other operator is shooting because also we know the limitations of the lenses that you're using and how, like, if you see them go for a wide shot, you might need to take a step back. And that I think that really helps with the whole flow, just to kind of keeping in mind what everybody else is shooting. I did American Auto was the last scripted show I did. It was a little different. Like everybody was kind of more locked into their shots. You had so many reflections and so many bad things in the background to worry about. The last thing you were worried about is what everybody else was shooting. But on St. Denis, the set, the way it was built, there were reflections, but there wasn't like floor to ceiling glass that we had to worry about, or multiple layers of glass that create these impossible reflections to work around. So the way the set, it's a hospital, so I guess there's not a need for a lot of glass, but the way the set was built made it pretty easy for us to go in and show. We are also showing large in some of the scenes, we might be seeing more than 180 degrees of the set. So the fourth wall doesn't really exist. And the way it was lit mainly from above, so we were able to, in one scene, just pretty much not worry about whip panning over and seeing something bad as long as you made sure you dress that before you shoot the scene and everything, the background is, ready to go. Yeah, just having the freedom to be able to do all that, it was a lot of fun on this show.
Yeah, and I think that's a really good, an important point for shows like this too, is having the freedom of not having a ton of reflection. It gives the camera operators freedom, but also gives the cast freedom to improv and move around and act, to where if suddenly they do something crazy and I need to whip over someplace I didn't think I was going to shoot, I can because they're not worried about a ton of reflections, and I think you do your due diligence to, like, on these shows, to be like, well, I'm not supposed to be looking that way, but I might, so let's just clear it. Like anything I could see from here, let's just clear it so we're ready in case somebody wants to do something really funny. I can shoot it. And I think the set design is really important for that, because if there are too many reflections or unshootable things, it really also hinders the acting and the comedy. And them having the freedom to do what they want and know that we can just cover it, I think is really important to the show.
Talk to me more about the actors and how they take to all of these challenges. Because again, you create a lot of the space, as you've mentioned, so they can improv, but improv can also throw up what feels like a delicate balance, particularly when you're moving that quickly.
I mean, I think we've probably all worked on things that were truly improv, where they just let the actors kind of do and say what they want. So for this show, I mean, we're pretty much on script. But that said, there's a looseness to it in terms of adjustments. What Mandy was talking about, it creates an environment where the actors can not get locked into an action or a timing. I think at the end of the day, our job is like to do all those things that our bosses, our producers, directors, and cinematographers are telling us to do. But I think Mandy and Danny probably agree with this in some extent. Our job is also really there to capture what actors are doing. So we work really hard at making sure that we're not doing something that limits the actors, and that helps them. It helps them work fast. If they can work fast, it helps them maintain the energy. If you maintain the energy, people with high energy tend to be funnier. So all of that, it kind of all works in tandem. And also we have to make sure the actors like us because especially like we don't on this show, we don't have the ability to kind of be anonymous camera people. Like it's just not even an option because like on some show, I don't know, like a drama where the camera's always 20 feet away, and you're on a zoom lens, you could probably literally never talk to an actor on a show like that and just let the AD kind of handle all that stuff. But on our show, we are oftentimes so close to the actors that we have to coordinate a little choreography with them to not hit them in the head with a camera. I mean, we are literally that close to the actors sometimes. And these sets are based on real places. So they're small. Like the ER rooms are not really oversized. Like we're shooting in places that are intentionally real and not big. So we do have a comparatively intimate relationship with the actors. And if they decide they don't like us, that's a big problem because, you know, but the way to make them like us is basically, I think, to maintain a work environment where they feel they have this freedom and that they don't have to really worry about us, that we'll just kind of, you know, get the stuff they do, and I don't know, Mandy, you had like, I think you had a good relationship with the
Well,
actors as well.
David Allen Greer did me a big solid on the pilot, and I don't know for sure why, but I often feel that sometimes when you're the only woman on set, people um, can notice that, and I feel like he was trying to give me a little boost of, I don't know, confidence and hey guys, be nice to Mandy because the pilot, we shot in an actual hospital, and he found out my name and then proceeded to sing the entire Barry Manilow Mandy song, all of it in front of
Did that
everybody.
start on the pilot?
Yeah, it
Oh,
started on the
yeah,
pilot.
he did that for a long time.
He did it for a long time, and I loved it secretly, but it was also very like, I'm not good at having attention on me, and but it made me feel very welcomed. And so maybe I feel like maybe he could tell I was nervous and was just trying to like give me an ally, which I really appreciated. And I felt like he brought that onto set and regularly did that. And then got other people to sing the song. And I mean, that song has followed me around since I worked at Kmart. But it was, like I felt like the cast was really cool to all of us. Like they were all very friendly and normal and funny all the time and collaborative. I mean, it was real. I gotta say, I mean, for me, this was probably one of my most positive work experiences from top to bottom. Like Eric and Justin and Simon and all of the producers and I mean the writer, everybody was just so nice and so collaborative and supportive and happy. And Matt came onto the show to fill in for Jacob for a little bit. And he had just come from mayor of Kingstown, which is like a real serious drama. And he walked in, he was like, oh my God, everybody is so happy. It was just such a happy, fun set that I feel like, I don't know, maybe that also contributes to the show. Everybody was happy to be at work, enjoyed being around each other. And the cast, I felt like, found their footing together really quickly. Their comedy, I feel like, shows that their relationships, like, I don't know. I thought they were great and wonderful to work with.
Yeah, David Allen Greer asked me, I think the first thing he said to me is, when's Mandy coming back?
That's
Yeah.
okay. When Matt came in, he goes, okay, not Jacob.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah.
When the cast like teases you openly, it's a good sign.
Yeah, I was hoping it was because he likes me. He was messing with me.
No, it is. It is. He likes you.
Now, what is it like when you get guest stars? Because I know in those first 6 episodes,
Hmm.
there are casts that come in for significant roles, but they're only there that episode. You guys talk about a rhythm between camera and the cast, but a guest star, I don't know, is it sink or swim, or do you have to make special accommodations for folks who maybe are new to the team?
I didn't feel like we did. Don't know I mean, some of them I feel like have done other shows like this. So they knew how to work in that environment of mockumentary. I'm sure the cast and the producers and stuff talked to them maybe during table reads, but I felt like everybody just fell right in. I don't remember ever having to like explain anything except maybe like sometimes if there's like a really short line you have to get, the only thing I might do is ask them to put a little handle on it, like a clear your throat or a hey or an or just some sound that can give me a reason to pan to them. But no, I feel like maybe a lot of the people also work with this team a lot or before, so they're kind of familiar with the environment. Maybe I'm just too positive and rose-colored glasses for this job. I don't know.
Yeah, every now and then I would overhear a guest actor making a comment to the regular cast, something like, wait a minute, are we done? Is that it? Did we just finish the scene? And, there was this kind of sense of like, how is it this fast? And that was so easy. So if an actor came in and they had not done this style of shooting before, they would have a different expectation in terms of how many takes and how long does it take between setups. So we had lighting setups that were 7 minutes long. I mean, they could do this so insanely fast. And it was literally not even enough time for the camera operators to run out and go to the bathroom and come back. I mean, that happened regularly where I'd go out 10-1, meaning go to the bathroom, come back, and they'd be like, okay, Jacob's back. Let's shoot. I'm like, wait, you were waiting for me? All I did was go to the bathroom and get a candy bar. Like, this
Yeah.
is crazy. So the guest actors would come in, and generally the reaction I would overhear was, wow, this is awesome. You guys shoot so quickly and it's like so intuitive. And, or they'd look occasionally and be like, oh my God, I'm so sorry. They look down and they'd realize they were 2 feet off their mark. And they would look at the camera operators and say, oh my God, is that okay? Do we need to go again? And be like, no, we're fine. No, it's all good. Because we're just, 9 out of 10 times we can kind of accommodate,
Mhm.
that kind of thing. And then, like, I think when Mande was talking about how much we pay attention to what the actors are doing and how we kind of intuit people's habits and tendencies, we can pick up pretty quickly whether an actor is good at hitting a mark or whether they are consistently off a mark. And a lot of times actors will be consistently off a mark in the same direction, especially within a scene. And that's fine. Like, we just notice it and we move on. And unless there's actually some technical issue that's coming up, we won't even say anything. So
Mhm.
I think our guest actors really appreciate that kind of speed and ease that allows them to just focus on the lines and focus on their acting and focus on the other actors. And they seem to find just a nice rhythm with that because it's not chopped up in this process that traditional filmmaking can be so chopped up, like, okay, we did the wide shot. Now it's going to be 30 minutes and we're going to do your medium shot. And then it'll be another 30 minutes and we'll do your close up. And then we're going to turn the room around and do it all again on the other side. And that's kind of what people have
Mhm.
experienced a lot of times.
Yeah.
And we don't shoot like that.
There's not a lot of going to your trailer
Yeah.
on this show. Yeah. I don't know. That might help in their relationships too with each other on camera, is that they spend a lot of time just hanging out together where in whatever space we've put them in to sit in for the 7 minute lighting, or, for the quick moments that they're not on camera, they're spending time together. And maybe that helps some too. Also, I kind of just want to say really quick, I don't know how I sounded about David, but I love that dude and In Living Color and like my whole life. And so I was really excited to work with him. I gotta tell you. So I hope it sounded positive what I was saying about him. But yeah, I think the cast hanging out so much together was maybe helpful in the comedy as well.
I want to ask you guys about a specific scene in the holiday episode, the last one that aired before the break. It culminates with a TikTok video filmed vertically, and all the cast is in it. I think they're doing a lip syncing bit. But so a scene like that, did that require special preparation, or did you do things technically, or is that just something they're going to fix in post to add the vertical effect to it? I don't know who was on that episode, but give me a sense of if that scene was a particular challenge or, I don't know, just another day at the office for you guys.
This is a big day for Jacob.
That was my cameo. Yeah, that
You did a
was.
lot of work. You did a lot of work that day.
But the scene that was like the holiday TikTok video scene where they did like a whole choreographed dance number. It was definitely one of those scenes where some of the things we did are not in the final episode, but it basically came down to Kayun, our actress, shot that herself. Like, so they rehearsed it. Our director of photography worked with them to kind of come up with the basic choreography of what the camera was going to do. And then Kayun did it, like, she shot that herself vertically. And then part of what I think doesn't make the episode is there was like a little ending kind of piece that was also on the phone, the shot on the phone, that I don't think they use that part. But yeah, we were all really impressed with her timing for that.
She was like, "Oh my God, you guys, I'm shooting." She's the best. She's so funny.
Yeah, it was awesome. But I mean, I think that was like a good example of how committed they are to making things feel real, you know, that they didn't like it was just a phone, like there was nothing fancy or special about. I think they had like a transmitter on it. Like they
Mhm.
somehow figured out our first camera assistant and the camera team figured out a way to get a transmitter onto the phone. Jay-Z.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was quite impressive. So they could actually see it while we were shooting it, I believe.
Yeah, there's a whole on my most recent job, there was a lot of stuff we had to shoot on the actual iPhone because it was playing as if it was on an iPhone. And it's crazy the technology now. You can watch it in Video Village, you can set it up to match the camera, you can control, whatever, a bunch of tech stuff that I don't do. But the DIT, and if you have a DIT, the DIT and the first AC and the DP or whoever on these shows now, you can integrate an iPhone. It's pretty crazy.
Well, did you guys have other favorite scenes from these 6 episodes? And as you mentioned earlier, I know some of these were filmed out of order. So, Danny, I'm assuming some of your work we've seen on TV already as well, right? Which of these episodes did you work on?
Episode 5, that was a fun one. There is a scene that kind of stands out in that one as far as like the improv aspect. So the last scene in Act 1 where it is Ron and Bruce are pretty much arguing and fighting over a candy bar, which is pretty hilarious. There was a vending machine, and Ron every day at a certain time he gets a nutrageous bar and goes and eats it in the stairwell to kind of decompress. And of course, Bruce gets the last one and kind of gloats about it. But so they're arguing about it right in front of a crowd of people, throwing insults, and they both end up leaving because they're important and they have things to do. But that leaves Keith there, who's kind of like, he's always kind of hovering in the background when he's in these scenes. Like people are, and, like throwing insults at him, and he takes them the wrong way, takes them as a compliment, which is what makes it funny. But as the two, as Ron and Bruce both exit the frame, there's Keith just standing there. And I don't think this was scripted, but he said, "Well, I guess I have somewhere to go too." And he does a 180, turns around and just like walks right into a medical cart and just kind of crashes into it. So that wasn't scripted. As far as it wasn't in the shooting draft, it might have been, I don't know if it was an alt or something, but he started doing that after the first take. So like as reality camera operators, we're kind of waiting for things like this to happen. Each take, he would do something different. Like there was a closed door right there, and he went and tried to open the door and it wouldn't open. He slams into it on one of the takes. Another one, he walked right into a background actor and almost fell over. But the one they ended up using, I think, was might have been on that single camera pass, but he looks right in the lens and he's like, "Well, I guess I have something to do too." Turns around and crashes into the cart. But that was all, I'm pretty sure, as far as I know, unscripted. And it was one of my favorite scenes of that episode. And it was fun to shoot and just like, waiting to see what he would do next.
I was so jealous when I saw that episode. I was like, oh, this is so good. I'm so sad I wasn't there. You did such a great job. It was so funny.
I like that episode a lot. It was one of those scripts where I was really impressed with the writing because they weren't afraid to kind of like go after issues that you could say could be uncomfortable to address, but they did just such a good job with it. I thought, I'd love, I'm sure we'll see more of that kind of stuff going forward, because there like in within that episode are some very real issues about race and how we deal with race in the workplace and the role of Allison, the lead nurse, in terms of managing all this and, making sure she does it in a way that works as a manager, is fair to all the employees, and then also is racially sensitive. And it's like you just see how she's struggling with that. And I was just really impressed that they were not afraid to kind of go into an issue like that and make something that was still like relatable and really funny.
Well, there's one thing about the set that I really loved is I felt like there were so many different kinds of people in every department. And I don't know, it just felt nice. It felt like everyone was there so you could make jokes about whoever, whatever, because all the people are there to weigh in and to be a part of the process. And the writers were all from a lot of different backgrounds. And I think that's part of what made it such a good experience to me personally, is just feeling like it was such a well-represented set. And it aids to the comedy as well, because you're like, the writer who wrote this is living this. So, it's funny because it's true. And I don't know, I love that about this show. And I think it is probably part of the reason it's so well received.
And we've had 6 episodes. The season is going to run 18. So we still got 2/3 of the season to go. Episode 7 is airing next week.
Mm-hmm.
What kind of non-spoilery things can you tease about upcoming episodes, whether it's a favorite one you want people to watch for, or things you think are going to be really great? And again, you probably haven't seen these future episodes either, but give us a tease for what we can expect.
So I think coming up, there's definitely an episode that stands out to me where you might get to meet Joyce's boyfriend, which definitely will not disappoint.
So Joyce has referenced her boyfriend a couple of times we've already seen, but we haven't actually seen anyone on camera yet.
Getting to know more about Joyce and her boyfriend, excellent TV. It's so funny.
The episodes are not, there's not like an arc really through the episodes. They're fairly one-off, episodes. But what you do see is an evolution of the characters and what makes them tick. And I think the surgeon Bruce has there's some stuff with Bruce where we see a little deeper into his psyche. And it's funny, but it's also real and relatable.
Yeah.
I really appreciated that, because that was another one of those moments where I felt like, oh, there's some real humanity underneath the comedy.
Mm-hmm.
And that was something that each day I really enjoyed. And then sometimes the comedy is very light and even a little bit slapsticky here and there, which doesn't happen a lot, but it has a pretty broad, kind of comical range. And from a camera operator standpoint, I think it's important for us to connect to the story. There's all these technical aspects to it. There's physical aspects to it, that we haven't really discussed about how we actually do this job of holding this 40-pound camera on our bodies for 8 to 12 hours a day. But when you're filming something, you can't really think about any of that. You have to really, you should be very connected to the story and what the actors are doing at every given moment. And so when we are doing the comedy, it involves better catch that joke, especially if it's a physical joke. You got to see it, and you got to see it in a way that makes it funny. But then when there's these moments of real human interest underlying the comedy, you should be connected to that as well. So the writing in this, one of the things I liked was that it made my daily job interesting, because there would be very often this kind of nice range of story and human content to connect to.
Yeah.
And it does inform the operating. I mean, it really does inform the operating. It informs like how you move, where you want to stand. I mean, a lot of it is probably subconscious, but then there's certain things you'll make sure you do, because we can ruin a moment if we screw it up. So it's not ever as simple as just stand here and point the camera at the person whose lips are moving. There's always some other decision making going into, the aesthetic choices and the technical choices you're making. Stick around and you'll see Bruce evolve.
Yeah. The character evolutions are really good. I think that's something I really appreciate about the writers and creators on this show, is that the characters are all full people with their flaws and with their humanity. It's like you might see somebody and be like, oh man, that person would be so annoying to work with. But also I kind of love them because they do this stupid thing. Or, and I love how they made all the characters people that you can be annoyed by, but also love. Like, because that way you can laugh at them and with them. I think they did a really good job. And watching them through this season, the evolution of their characters, I think is going to be really fun for people.
As a camera operator, I want to give a shout out to our second team players. because they're always important, but on this show, the second team players, also called our stand-ins, are really important. One of the biggest jobs they do for us as camera operators is when they're good at their job, and our second team players are very good at their job. When they're good at their job, they will actually remember, they'll watch the rehearsals, they'll see what the actors do, they'll remember what they do, where they stand, they'll help us ensure that the marks are put in the right place, and then they'll oftentimes run through a kind of rehearsal for us, which can be very important in terms of the technical parts of it, in terms of seeing, determining what we see, what we don't see. Do we need to move the whole sound department out of the background? So our second teamers are phenomenal. And so Robert, Jill, Roxana, and Mike, if you ever hear this, thank you so much.
Well, we'll make sure they hear it. I love the shout outs. We'll have the team shout outs. On that note, we'll call it a wrap. It was really great having you guys.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for doing this.
Thanks, Skid. It was a pleasure.
Listeners, we always appreciate your feedback. You'll find my contact info at our website, belowtheline1word.biz. That's B-I-Z. You'll also find past episodes and links to all of our social media, so check it out. We've advertised that there's more of St. Denis Medical for people to watch. What other shows are you guys working on, or where else can people see your next effort?
I feel fortunate that since we wrapped this show in September, that I have gotten enough work to maintain my health insurance, which I think is a big thing right now, because if you read the LA Times, the New York Times, you're probably seeing articles about how difficult a time the whole industry is having. But I've been working on an unscripted project called America's Most Wanted. So that's been a big change of pace. It's a pretty well-known true crime series, and it's been really interesting and is also amazingly union, so that's great. But we've all had these moments where you go from this kind of lighthearted comedy to listening to people talk about a murder, and that's just one of the things that makes, I think, our lives and our career so interesting. So I'm happy to have had that work, and I'm hoping 2025 kicks in and that we're all really busy.
I just finished a Greg Daniels show called The Paper. That is, I would call it a spin-off of The Office. And I was super lucky because I got to take my focus puller Brandon and second AC Esta with me. So we just wrapped that up, and don't know when it's going to air, but it'll be on NBC.
And I just wrapped up a show for ABC called The Great Christmas Light Fight, where I'm director of photography. It's basically a competition reality show about installing over-the-top Christmas decorations. That won't air until next year. Before that, I did the latest 2 seasons of Hell's Kitchen and American Ninja Warrior.
Well, good luck to all you here in 2025. My closing credits, thanks to Curtis Five for our music, John Wan for our logo, and to all of our listeners, I appreciate you. The Below the Line logo is available on t-shirts, mugs, and stickers at redbubble.com. Please rate us wherever you get your podcasts and tell your friends. Thanks again from Below the Line. So let's do the intro bit again, just so it's Mandy's fault, just so we're clear why you guys are doing overtime today. Just so you place it entirely on one person.
Beer's on me.
All right. Today we're talking about St. Denis Medical, the workplace comedy series that's currently airing on NBC and streaming on Peacock. And my guests today are 3 camera operators from the show. First, Jacob Pinger. You were the A operator all season. Welcome.
Thank you very much. And I also wanted to throw a quick introductory shout out to my first AC, Jason, JZ, and my second AC, David, Clean, Berryman, and my dolly grip, Joel Prescott, because we function as a team. So everything we're going to talk about, in my view, is sort of a team effort.
And now you're fucking with me, Jacob. I don't know what I'm going to do with that.
I was like, do I do this too? What do I do now? Oh my God.
Oh God, I'm so sorry. I could do that in a different way. Oh my God. I know that it'll be hard to even get that in
Mandy,
there.
you want to introduce your full team as well? You mentioned a couple of names. Do you want to say them again, the team you had on this show?
Sure. I mean, I think it would be nice that I was thinking we should have brought up how integral our focus pullers were as we were chatting. I feel like I got a little lost and I didn't do what I said I was going to
I
do.
totally agree. That's why I was like, oh shit, here's my chance.
Well, this is your
I'm sorry.
post-credits moment, guys. So go ahead and name anybody else you want to name here. We'll make sure they at least get a post-credits mention.
Okay. So what do? I just shout out my
Just say,
team?
oh yeah, here's my team.
Okay. I had a wonderful team of Brandon, my focus puller, Esta, our second AC extraordinaire, and Chris, our dolly grip. Pleasure every day.
How about you, Danny? Do you want to name your team as well?
Yeah.
Danny hated his team.
I was going to say, no.
I'm
Solo
kidding.
operation. They were dragging me down.
Yeah, I'll give a shout out to my team that I took over from Mandy, which was also Brandon, Esta, and I had them for a couple episodes, and then Ken Bender and Blake Hooks stepped in as first AC focus puller and second AC, and Chris Olson was my dolly grip.
Always love the team shout outs.
I love this so much.